There is a strange feeling many people recognize, even if they never talk about it. It usually comes at night. You might be alone in a quiet room, or walking under an open sky, when a subtle awareness settles in. Nothing moves. Nothing makes a sound. And yet, it feels as though something is paying attention. Not watching in an obvious way. Not following. Just noticing. Most people dismiss this feeling quickly. The mind looks for logic. There is no evidence. No sound. No movement. So the thought fades, and life continues. But the feeling itself is worth noticing. Because humans evolved to detect attention. Long before cities and technology, survival depended on sensing when something else was aware of you. A predator did not need to move to be dangerous. Being seen was enough. That instinct never left. Even today, the brain reacts to the idea of observation before it reacts to proof. It is subtle, quiet, almost automatic. Now imagine this feeling not in a forest, but on a planetary scale. Every night, Earth turns slowly beneath a sky filled with silence. Billions of lights glow on the surface. Signals move outward into space. Radio waves, data, noise, patterns, all drifting endlessly into the dark. And above it all, the universe does not respond. At least, not in ways we clearly understand. The sky looks empty, calm, uninterested. But silence does not always mean absence. In many situations, silence is deliberate. It is chosen. On Earth, observers often stay hidden so the subject behaves naturally. Wildlife researchers do this. Scientists do this. Even humans do this with each other. Observation works best when it goes unnoticed. The unsettling idea is not that something might be hostile. It is that something might be patient. Something advanced enough to remain unseen. Something intelligent enough to understand that revealing itself too early would change everything. No warnings. No messages. No arrival. Just distance. Stillness. Watching. This story does not claim that such a presence exists. There is no proof. No confirmation. No final answer waiting at the end. But there is a question that has grown harder to ignore as technology advances and the universe remains quiet. What if Earth is not unobserved? What if the reason the sky feels empty is not because no one is there, but because someone has learned how to stay invisible? And what if this observation is not something that happened long ago, or something that might happen in the future, but something happening right now? That thought lingers, not as fear, but as awareness. And once it appears, the night sky never feels quite as empty as it did before. The sky is one of the few things most people see every day and almost never question. It stretches endlessly above cities and oceans, unchanged by borders or time zones. Planes cross it. Satellites pass through it. Stars remain fixed in their patterns. And somehow, this vast space has become background. Something ordinary. People look up to check the weather, notice the moon, maybe admire a few stars, and then their attention returns to Earth. Bills, messages, noise, movement. The sky stays quiet. This quiet has taught us something without saying it out loud. It has trained us to believe that nothing important is happening up there. That if something were present, it would announce itself. Flash. Move. Speak. But that belief is very new. For most of human history, the sky was not ignored. It was watched carefully. Patterns were memorized. Changes were feared. Movements were recorded long before writing existed. People believed the sky mattered because it felt active, even when it was still. Modern life reversed that relationship. Technology filled the silence. Artificial light erased the stars. Screens pulled attention downward. The sky did not change, but our relationship with it did. And in that shift, something subtle happened. We began to associate silence with emptiness. Yet in almost every other part of life, silence carries meaning. A quiet room changes behavior. A silent phone creates tension. An animal that suddenly goes quiet signals danger. Silence is rarely neutral. In science, silence is not ignored. It is measured. It is analyzed. When something expected does not appear, the absence becomes data. This is where the sky becomes unsettling again. Because by now, Earth should be loud. For over a century, humanity has been broadcasting itself outward. Radio signals, radar, television waves, military scans, satellite transmissions. A constant, expanding bubble of information moving into space. From a cosmic perspective, Earth is no longer hidden. And yet, the universe remains quiet. No clear replies. No unmistakable signals. No obvious visitors. This absence is often called the Great Silence. Some see it as proof that no one is out there. Others see it as a delay, a waiting period. But there is another possibility that feels harder to sit with. What if the silence is not coming from emptiness, but from restraint? What if something is present, close enough to observe, advanced enough to remain undetected, and patient enough to wait without revealing itself? In that case, the sky would look exactly the way it does now. Empty, calm, unresponsive. Not because nothing is happening, but because whatever is happening is not meant to be noticed. And once that possibility settles in, the sky above Earth no longer feels passive. It feels aware, quietly, continually, watching. When humans want to understand something unfamiliar, they rarely approach it directly. They watch first. Across history, observation has always come before contact. When researchers study wildlife, they do not announce themselves. They hide. They remain still. They allow patterns to emerge without interference. Only after enough time passes do they step closer. The reason is simple. Presence changes behavior. The moment a subject realizes it is being observed, everything shifts. Natural patterns collapse. Instincts sharpen. Decisions change. What is being studied becomes distorted. So the most accurate information comes from distance. This principle is not limited to science. It appears in psychology, anthropology, and even everyday life. People observe social spaces before entering them. Parents watch children before intervening. Silence is often used to learn more than questions ever could. Now imagine this principle applied on a cosmic scale. If an advanced intelligence were interested in Earth, immediate contact would be the least effective option. It would create panic. It would reshape cultures. It would alter behavior instantly and permanently. Observation, on the other hand, allows a civilization to be understood as it truly is. How it acts when it believes it is alone. How it treats its planet. How it responds to fear, scarcity, and power. From that perspective, distance becomes valuable. There is also the matter of time. Human lifespans are short. Civilizations rise and fall within a few thousand years. Technology evolves rapidly, often without stability. From an outside view, humanity may appear impatient, loud, still developing. A watcher with a longer sense of time would have no reason to hurry. Waiting decades, centuries, or longer would not feel excessive. It would feel careful. This patience might explain something that has puzzled scientists and philosophers alike. Why, if intelligent life is possible elsewhere, has there been no clear moment of contact? One answer is absence. Another is timing. And another, quieter possibility is choice. The decision not to interfere may not come from fear or hostility. It may come from understanding. The understanding that civilizations reveal the most about themselves when they believe no one is watching. From this view, silence is not emptiness. It is methodology. Earth continues to broadcast its presence. Signals expand outward. Technology advances. Environmental changes accelerate. Social structures shift. And still, nothing obvious arrives. Which leads to a subtle but unsettling thought. If observation comes before contact, and if patience is part of the process, then contact may not be missing at all. It may simply not be necessary yet. Because from a distance, with enough time, everything worth knowing can be learned. And the most effective observers are the ones who never announce themselves. They remain unseen, unnoticed, and free to watch. If observation is intentional, then the next question is not whether it happens, but why it remains invisible. One possible explanation is often referred to as the zoo hypothesis. The idea is simple and quietly unsettling. Advanced civilizations may view developing worlds the way humans view protected ecosystems. A rainforest is not disturbed, so it can be understood. A rare species is observed from a distance, so its behavior remains natural. Interference is avoided, not out of cruelty, but out of caution. Contact changes everything. History offers many examples. When a technologically advanced society encounters a less developed one, the result is rarely balance. Culture collapses. Identity dissolves. Progress accelerates unevenly. Even well-intended contact leaves permanent scars. If an intelligence understood this pattern, restraint would be logical. From that perspective, Earth would not be ignored. It would be preserved. Observation allows patterns to unfold without disruption. It allows long-term trends to be measured. Evolution, social structures, conflict, cooperation, all of it can be studied more accurately when the subject does not know it is being watched. And knowing is the key. The moment humanity becomes certain it is not alone, behavior would change overnight. Governments would react. Religions would shift. Technology would accelerate in unpredictable ways. Fear and fascination would reshape priorities. A watcher interested in understanding humanity as it truly is would avoid that moment for as long as possible. This does not require secrecy out of fear. It requires patience. A civilization capable of interstellar observation would not think in decades. It would think in centuries, possibly longer. Waiting would not feel passive. It would feel precise. This also explains something else. Why observation would be quiet. No probes landing on city streets. No messages broadcast in familiar languages. No displays meant to be noticed. Because the goal would not be communication. It would be understanding. In that context, the absence of contact is not a failure. It is a sign of success. The system is working. The subject remains unaware. The data remains undistorted. Earth continues to behave naturally. From this angle, silence becomes deliberate. Not an accident of distance or rarity, but a chosen strategy. And if Earth were being treated as a protected environment rather than a target, then the lack of interaction would make sense. The most unsettling part of this idea is not that something might be watching. It is that from their perspective, nothing is wrong. No intervention is needed. No announcement is required. Everything is unfolding exactly as intended. Quietly. Naturally. Under observation. If something were observing Earth, remaining hidden would not be difficult. Advanced observation does not require proximity, visibility, or movement that draws attention. On Earth, the most effective monitoring systems are often the ones no one notices. Sensors are small. Cameras are silent. Data is collected without interaction. Visibility is a limitation of primitive systems. A civilization capable of observing planets would not rely on crude methods. It would understand that being seen is unnecessary and often counterproductive. The moment an observer becomes visible, it stops being an observer and becomes part of the environment it is studying. Remaining hidden preserves accuracy. There is also the question of scale. Human technology is built around human perception. We see within a narrow range of light. We hear within a limited band of sound. We detect movement and heat only within certain thresholds. Anything operating outside those thresholds would appear invisible by default. This does not require advanced cloaking devices in the dramatic sense. It only requires systems designed without human senses in mind. A probe that emits no light, no heat, and no sound within our detectable range would pass unnoticed even if it were close. Distance adds another layer of concealment. Observation does not need to occur within Earth's atmosphere. In fact, staying outside it would be safer and more stable. No weather, no friction, no interference. A stationary platform in space could monitor an entire planet continuously without ever being detected. And time works in favor of the observer. There is no urgency, no schedule to meet. Waiting decades or centuries would not feel like delay. It would feel like patience. Human civilization is still noisy, unstable, and rapidly changing. Watching it settle would make sense. This may explain why sightings, if they exist at all, are inconsistent. Not because observers are careless, but because detection is accidental, brief, unintended. A moment where human instruments intersect with something not designed to be seen. Most of the time, nothing appears, because nothing wants to be noticed. If observation is happening, it would be subtle, almost boring. No dramatic arrivals, no clear silhouettes, no behavior meant to inspire belief or disbelief. Just data, patterns, trends. And from this perspective, the most effective hiding strategy is not deception. It is irrelevance. To remain unnoticed, something does not need to disguise itself as something else. It only needs to exist where no one thinks to look, operating in ways no one expects, which raises an unsettling thought. If observation were happening quietly, patiently, and from a distance, the question would not be why we haven't seen anything. The question would be why we assume we would. Despite the silence, there have been moments that feel out of place. Brief incidents, fleeting observations, objects that appear and disappear without explanation. Not dramatic enough to announce themselves, yet strange enough to resist easy dismissal. They do not behave like conventional machines. When pilots describe them, a pattern emerges. Sudden acceleration without visible propulsion. Instant changes in direction. Movement that ignores inertia, heat signatures, or known aerodynamic limits. These reports are not new, but they were once easy to dismiss. Poor instruments. Misidentification. Stress. Optical illusion. What changed was not the phenomenon. It was the witnesses. Trained observers. Advanced sensors. Multiple systems confirming the same event at the same time. Radar, infrared, visual contact, all briefly aligned. And still, no clear explanation followed. What is most striking about these encounters is not what the objects do, but what they do not do. They do not engage. They do not signal. They do not approach with intention. They appear, move in ways that suggest awareness, and then vanish. This behavior does not resemble exploration. It does not resemble attack. It does not resemble communication. It resembles monitoring. On Earth, observation drones behave similarly. They enter airspace briefly. They collect data. They leave. Their purpose is not to be seen, but visibility is sometimes unavoidable. If something were observing Earth from a distance, occasional detection would not be surprising. No system is perfect. Intersections happen. Sensors evolve. Detection thresholds change. What matters is consistency. These objects do not linger. They do not return to the same location openly. They do not escalate behavior after being noticed, almost as if being detected is a mistake rather than a goal. This is where the idea of observation becomes more fitting than visitation. A visitor announces presence, even unintentionally. An observer avoids it. And yet, if observation were real, it would not be constant in the way humans imagine. It would not involve continuous movement or frequent appearances. Most monitoring systems are static, passive, waiting. Movement would only occur when necessary. To reposition, to recalibrate, to avoid detection. From this angle, the absence of clear interaction is not disappointing. It is expected. Observation does not need witnesses. It needs consistency. Earth continues to change. Technology accelerates. Signals increase. Environmental patterns shift. Social systems strain and adapt. If something were watching, these changes would matter more than any single event. And the few moments when something unusual slips into awareness would not be messages. They would be reminders, not intentional ones. Just evidence that even the quietest systems occasionally intersect with our attention. Briefly, before returning to silence, if observation were taking place, it would not need to happen from Earth at all. The idea of watchers moving through our atmosphere is shaped by human thinking. We imagine aircraft, craft, or beings operating within familiar boundaries. But advanced observation would avoid unnecessary complexity. Space offers advantages Earth never could. No weather, no friction, no borders. From orbit, an entire planet can be studied without interruption. Patterns emerge more clearly when distance removes noise. Human activity, environmental changes, energy use, and technological growth become visible as systems rather than events. This is how humans observe their own world. Weather satellites do not land to collect data. They remain above, silent and persistent. Communication satellites do not announce themselves. They simply function, unseen by most people, shaping daily life without being noticed. If humanity uses this method to study its own planet, it is reasonable to imagine others doing the same. Observation from space also reduces risk. Entering a planet's atmosphere requires commitment. It creates variables. Detection becomes more likely. Remaining outside allows complete control over visibility and movement. An observer can watch indefinitely without revealing position or intent. This changes the question entirely. Instead of asking why something would come here, the better question becomes why it would ever need to. From a distance, everything important is visible. Cities glow at night. Radio noise spreads outward. Satellites trace predictable paths. Nuclear tests alter atmospheric patterns. A civilization studying Earth would not need to land to understand its direction. And if such observation were happening, it would likely focus on stable vantage points. Places where movement is minimal, where long-term monitoring is possible, where recalibration requires little effort. Earth's orbital neighborhood offers exactly that. Certain regions of space remain balanced, held in place by gravitational forces. Objects stationed there require very little energy to stay aligned. Once positioned, they can remain almost indefinitely. From these locations, Earth can be observed continuously, quietly, without motion that draws attention. This kind of observation would not feel dramatic. It would feel patient, methodical, almost boring by human standards, which may be why it goes unnoticed. Humans look for movement, for change, for interruption. A system designed to observe without interference would produce none of those things. It would simply remain. And if something were watching Earth from space rather than within it, the absence of obvious activity would make sense. Nothing would need to appear. Nothing would need to approach. Nothing would need to respond. The observation would already be complete, which leads naturally to a more specific question. If space is the ideal place to watch a planet, then which location would offer the clearest view of Earth? One place stands out, not because it moves, but because it never does. If there were a place designed for quiet, uninterrupted observation, it would not need to move very much. Movement attracts attention. Motion creates patterns that can be tracked. Stability, on the other hand, disappears into the background. It becomes part of the environment, easy to ignore. There is one object in Earth's vicinity that fits this description almost perfectly: the moon. It is always there, always visible, always in the same relationship to Earth. It does not drift unpredictably. It does not change its behavior. It follows a steady rhythm that has remained largely unchanged for billions of years. From Earth's surface, it feels permanent. From an observational perspective, permanence matters. The moon occupies a position that offers a continuous, unobstructed view of Earth. One side always faces the planet. No recalibration required. No rotation to manage. The same hemisphere remains locked in place, quietly overlooking the world below. This alone is unusual. Most natural satellites rotate freely. The moon does not. It remains tidally locked, presenting the same face toward Earth without variation. To an observer, this creates a constant frame of reference, a platform that never needs to adjust. The moon is also distant enough to avoid interference. No atmosphere to distort signals. No magnetic storms. No weather. Just open space and silence. From there, Earth's activity becomes clear. City lights, energy use, communications. Even subtle changes in climate and surface behavior can be tracked over long periods. This does not mean the moon is artificial. There is no proof of that. Science explains its behavior through natural processes. But explanation does not erase usefulness. Even if formed by chance, the moon happens to be positioned in a way that makes observation unusually efficient. A coincidence that benefits any watcher, regardless of origin. This may explain why the moon appears so often in speculation. Not because it is mysterious on its own, but because it is convenient. If something were observing Earth quietly, patiently, and without interference, the moon would not need to be altered or occupied in any obvious way. It would simply need to be used. Observation does not require presence in the way humans imagine. It does not require structures, lights, or movement. It requires perspective. And the moon provides that perspective effortlessly. This idea does not turn the moon into a threat. It does not transform it into a base or a machine. It simply reframes it as a vantage point. A place that sees without acting. That watches without responding. That remains silent regardless of what happens below. Which makes its constancy feel different. not alarming, just attentive. And once the moon is seen this way, its silence feels less empty. It feels occupied by purpose. Quietly, if observation were happening, it would not rely on sight alone. Watching a planet means listening to it. Every technological civilization produces noise. Not sound in the traditional sense, but signals. Bursts of energy that carry patterns, repetition, and intent. Over time, these signals reveal far more than appearances ever could. Earth has been speaking for a long time. Radio transmissions began leaking into space more than a century ago. Early broadcasts were weak, unfocused, and short-lived. But over time, the noise increased. Radar systems swept the sky. Military communications intensified. Satellites multiplied. Data streams thickened. From a distance, Earth would no longer appear quiet. It would appear active. Signals do not travel instantly. They expand outward like ripples, forming a growing sphere around the planet. Any observer positioned within that expanding field would receive fragments of information, languages, rhythms, images, patterns of behavior. Enough to identify intelligence. Enough to recognize change. There have been moments when humans believed they heard something unusual in return. Brief signals that did not repeat. Bursts that did not match known sources. Patterns that seemed structured, then vanished. The most famous of these was a single, powerful radio signal detected in the late 20th century. It arrived once. It followed a narrow frequency, and it never returned. No confirmation followed. No explanation fully satisfied. Science moved on. Most signals eventually do get explanations. Natural phenomena can be complex. The universe produces noise of its own. Caution is necessary. Certainty is rare. But listening itself is revealing. Because advanced observation would prioritize signals over symbols. A civilization does not need to see another species to understand it. It needs to hear how that species communicates, how often it speaks, and what kind of order exists within the noise. From that perspective, Earth's signals tell a story. They reveal rapid technological acceleration, increasing energy use, global synchronization, conflict and cooperation unfolding simultaneously. They reveal a civilization still learning how to control the tools it has created. Listening allows this story to unfold without interruption. And listening does not require response. In fact, responding would contaminate the data. A reply would change behavior instantly. Silence preserves authenticity. This may explain why, if something is listening, it does not speak. Not because it cannot, but because speaking would end the observation. From this angle, the universe's quiet is not empty. It is focused, attentive, selective. Earth sends signals outward, unaware of who might be receiving them. And somewhere beyond our awareness, those signals may be doing exactly what signals are meant to do. They may be telling someone that Earth is no longer silent, that it has begun to announce itself, and that observation, once initiated, rarely stops. It simply continues, quietly, until the story becomes clear enough to understand. If observation has been happening for a long time, there is a reason it feels more noticeable now. Not because something changed in the sky, but because something changed on Earth. For most of human history, the planet was quiet in ways that mattered. Fires burned locally. Tools were simple. Signals faded quickly. From a distance, Earth would have looked alive, but not remarkable. That began to change very suddenly. In the span of just a few generations, humanity altered its signature. Energy use increased exponentially. Artificial light reshaped the night. Machines began transmitting continuously. Radio waves filled space with patterns that did not exist before. Then came a sharper shift. Nuclear technology. For the first time, Earth produced signals that were not just communicative, but unmistakable. Sudden releases of energy visible from far beyond the planet. Atmospheric changes that could not be confused with natural processes. From an observational standpoint, this would stand out, not as a threat, but as a milestone. A civilization capable of altering its planet and releasing immense energy has crossed a threshold. It has reached a point where its actions matter beyond its own surface. Whether it understands that or not is irrelevant. What matters is capability. After this point, Earth did not become quieter. It became louder. Satellites multiplied. Radar swept continuously. Digital communication replaced analog noise. The planet's electromagnetic output grew dense, structured, and constant. From a distance, this would not look chaotic. It would look organized. A system forming. A species learning to shape its environment, even as it struggles to manage the consequences. If observation were already in place, this phase would be especially interesting. Rapid change reveals priorities. It shows how a civilization responds to power, scarcity, and uncertainty. It exposes internal contradictions. It accelerates decision-making. There would be no need to intervene. Watching would be enough. This may be why the idea of observation feels more present now than it did in the past. Humans are more aware of their own visibility, more conscious of how much they broadcast, more aware that the sky is no longer distant. Space is no longer abstract. It is monitored, tracked, occupied, and in that awareness, the silence above begins to feel different. Not empty, not indifferent, just patient. If something had been watching quietly for a long time, this moment in human history would not be alarming. It would be informative, a turning point worth observing carefully, not because it demands action, but because it reveals direction. And when direction becomes clear, observation becomes more focused, more attentive, more deliberate, as if something, somewhere, has leaned slightly closer, not to be seen, but to see more clearly. If observation were the goal, then physical arrival would be unnecessary. Landing is a human assumption. It reflects how we explore, by going somewhere, touching it, leaving traces behind. But exploration does not always require presence. In many cases, presence is the least efficient option. Human technology already reflects this shift. Probes explore planets humans have never visited. Autonomous systems map terrain, analyze atmospheres, and transmit data without emotion or risk. Artificial intelligence processes information continuously, without fatigue or curiosity. An advanced civilization would not need bodies to observe a planet. It would need systems, long-lasting, self-correcting, capable of operating independently for extended periods of time. Systems that do not age, panic, or demand explanation. Such observers would not arrive dramatically. They would not land. They would not announce themselves. They would be deployed quietly, placed where they can function without interference. Once positioned, they would simply continue. Observation does not require interaction. It requires consistency. A monitoring system does not need to understand culture the way humans do. It needs patterns, frequency, change over time. It needs to see how systems behave under pressure and how they adapt to uncertainty. Earth provides endless data, climate fluctuations, resource use, communication networks, conflict cycles, cooperation, technological acceleration. collapse, and recovery. All of it unfolds naturally when no one is watching, or when no one believes they are. This may explain why there is no sense of urgency in the sky, no rush to arrive, no need to intervene, no reason to reveal presence. An observer designed to function independently would not react emotionally to progress or failure. It would not celebrate breakthroughs or fear mistakes. It would simply record, and recording takes time. From this perspective, the lack of contact is not mysterious. It is efficient. Contact would introduce variables. It would alter behavior. It would contaminate the data. Silence preserves accuracy. If Earth were being observed by systems rather than beings, then detection would be rare, accidental, temporary, a brief overlap between human sensors and something not meant to be noticed. No message would follow. No explanation would be offered, because the system's purpose would not include communication. It would include understanding. And understanding does not require conversation. It requires patience, which leads to a quieter realization. If observers do not need to land, speak, or reveal themselves, then the absence of those things tells us very little. It does not mean nothing is there. It simply means nothing needs to be. And in that silence, observation can continue, uninterrupted, unnoticed, and complete. If observation were happening through systems rather than presence, then silence would not be a flaw. It would be a feature. Communication introduces risk. Messages can be misinterpreted. Signals can be traced. Meaning can be distorted. For an observer interested only in understanding, silence is safer than speech. Silence keeps boundaries intact. On Earth, the most effective monitoring systems do not speak. They collect. They store. They transmit quietly. Their success depends on remaining unnoticed. The moment a subject becomes aware of surveillance, behavior changes. The same principle would apply on a planetary scale. If Earth were being observed, any form of direct communication would end the experiment instantly. Every culture, every institution, every individual would react. Fear would spread. Assumptions would form. Priorities would shift. Nothing would remain natural. Silence prevents that. It allows life to unfold without interference. It allows mistakes to happen, progress to occur, and patterns to stabilize or collapse on their own. From a distance, these outcomes are far more informative than controlled responses. This may explain why the universe feels unresponsive, not because nothing hears us, but because responding would defeat the purpose. Listening does not require acknowledgement. A researcher does not announce every note they take. A recorder does not interrupt the event it documents. Observation works best when it leaves no trace. This does not mean observation is indifferent. Silence can be attentive. A presence does not need to speak to be aware. It only needs to remain focused, still, consistent. In that sense, the absence of messages is not evidence of isolation. It may be evidence of restraint. Earth continues to send signals outward, unaware of who might be receiving them. Every broadcast adds to the record. Every advancement reshapes the data. And still, no reply comes back. Not because nothing is listening, but because listening is enough. This idea shifts the meaning of silence. It turns emptiness into intention. It reframes the quiet not as neglect, but as discipline. If observation has rules, then one of them would be simple. Do not interfere. Do not respond. Do not change what you are watching. Silence preserves truth. And if that is the case, then the quiet sky above Earth may not be empty at all. It may be carefully maintained, deliberately unbroken. so that whatever is unfolding below can be seen clearly, without distortion, exactly as it is. Long before modern technology gave names to satellites and signals, people were already telling stories about watchers. Not visitors, not invaders, but observers. Across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, similar images appear. Eyes in the sky, silent figures above the world, beings who see everything but rarely intervene. These stories do not focus on arrival or departure. They focus on presence, something that has always been there. In ancient texts, watchers are often described without detail. They are not given clear shapes or intentions. They simply observe. They record. They judge, sometimes, but more often they wait. To modern ears, these stories sound symbolic. Metaphors shaped by fear, wonder, or the need to explain the unknown. And they may be exactly that. But patterns matter. When similar ideas appear again and again in different places, it suggests a shared intuition, a human sense that the sky is not empty, even when it appears silent. Ancient people spent more time looking up than we do now. Nights were darker. Stars were clearer. The moon felt closer. Without artificial light or constant distraction, awareness expanded outward. The sky felt active. This does not mean ancient civilizations saw something we cannot. It means they felt something we have learned to ignore. A sense of scale. A sense of being part of something larger. A sense that life does not unfold in isolation. Over time, these feelings became stories. Watchers became gods. Eyes became symbols. Observation became judgment. Myth layered meaning onto awareness. Modern science stripped those stories of their literal interpretations, but the intuition remained. It simply changed language. Today, we speak of observers, probes, monitoring systems, and hypotheses. We replace myth with models. But the core idea is familiar, that something may see without being seen. What is striking is not that ancient cultures believed this, but that they did so without evidence, technology, or global communication. The idea emerged naturally from reflection, not data. Now, in an age of satellites and sensors, the idea returns, not as belief, but as possibility. Not because stories were right, but because observation is logical. When intelligence looks outward, it recognizes patterns it knows well. Curiosity leads to distance. Distance leads to watching. Watching leads to understanding. Whether ancient stories were imagination or intuition does not matter as much as what they reveal. Humans have always sensed that existence unfolds under attention. That awareness is not new. What is new is the realization that such attention, if it exists, would no longer need to be imagined as divine or mystical. It could be quiet, systematic, patient, and entirely indifferent to being noticed, which makes the old stories feel less like fantasies, and more like early attempts to describe something humans have always suspected, that the sky does not just contain light. It contains awareness. Watching, silently. From a scientific perspective, none of this is dismissed outright. Science rarely speaks in absolutes. It works with probability, evidence, and uncertainty. When something cannot be explained, it is not labeled impossible. It is labeled unresolved. This distinction matters. Astronomers openly acknowledge that the universe is vast beyond practical comprehension. Hundreds of billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, countless planets. In that scale, the idea that intelligence could exist elsewhere is not controversial. What remains uncertain is proximity. There is no confirmed evidence that Earth is being actively observed. no verified signal, no artifact, no undeniable encounter. Science is clear about that. But science is also clear about something else. The absence of confirmation does not equal confirmation of absence. Many phenomena once considered impossible were later understood only after detection methods improved. Microorganisms existed long before microscopes. Radiation existed before instruments could measure it. Entire planets were discovered only when technology caught up to theory. Observation depends on tools. If something operates beyond current detection limits, it would not announce itself as unknown. It would simply remain unnoticed. This is why scientists use careful language. Terms like unidentified and unexplained are chosen deliberately. They do not imply extraordinary conclusions, but they do preserve openness. Some data does not fit existing models cleanly. Some observations resist simple explanation. In those cases, science does not fill the gap with certainty. It leaves the gap open. This openness is often misunderstood. It is mistaken for denial or secrecy. In reality, it is discipline. Science does not speculate publicly without sufficient evidence, even when possibilities exist. That restraint creates space for imagination to grow, but it also protects against premature conclusions. In the context of observation, this balance is important. Science does not say Earth is being watched. Science also does not say Earth cannot be watched. It simply says there is not enough information to decide. This uncertainty is uncomfortable. Humans prefer clear answers. Either something is there or it is not. Either we are alone or we are not. Science offers neither comfort nor fear. It offers patience, and patience aligns closely with the idea of observation. Both involve waiting. Both involve gathering information slowly. Both resist immediate conclusions. If something were observing Earth, science would not rush to declare it. It would wait for patterns, repetition, independent confirmation. Until then, the question remains open, not as belief, but as possibility. A quiet one, held carefully, in the space between what is known and what has yet to be understood. Even without evidence, the idea itself creates discomfort. Not panic, not fear in the dramatic sense. Something quieter. A subtle tension that sits beneath awareness and is difficult to explain. The discomfort does not come from danger. It comes from attention. Humans are comfortable observing. We are far less comfortable being observed. To watch is to hold control. To be watched is to lose it. Even in ordinary life, the feeling of being seen changes behavior. People adjust posture, choose words carefully, become self-conscious. Now imagine that awareness expanding beyond individuals, beyond cities, beyond nations, to an entire planet. The thought does not threaten survival. It threatens certainty. For centuries, humanity has understood itself as the primary witness of its own story. History, culture, progress, all unfolding without an external audience. The idea that something else might be paying attention introduces a shift in perspective. Suddenly, actions feel contextualized, not judged, not corrected, just seen. That is unsettling, because being observed implies comparison. It suggests that behavior can be measured against something else, something older, something calmer, something with more time. This discomfort is psychological, not rational. There is no evidence that observation would bring consequence, no reason to assume harm or intervention. Yet the mind reacts anyway. It fills silence with meaning. It projects intention where none has been confirmed. This reaction says more about humans than about observers. Humans evolved to care deeply about reputation and perception. Social awareness kept early communities alive. Being seen meant belonging or danger. That instinct never disappeared. It scaled up with civilization. The idea of a larger observer activates the same response. Self-awareness intensifies. Suddenly, humanity's choices feel exposed. Environmental impact, conflict, inequality, cooperation, innovation, all visible from a distance. Not judged, just recorded. And that recording feels heavy. Because if something is watching, it is watching honestly. Without excuses, without narrative, without emotional framing. Just patterns. And patterns can be revealing. This is why the idea unsettles even those who do not believe it. It challenges the assumption of isolation. It suggests that humanity may not be the only point of reference for its own behavior. That awareness does not require belief to function. It simply needs to be imagined. And once imagined, it lingers. Quietly. Not as fear, but as a mirror held at a distance. Reflecting not what we say we are, but what we consistently do, under the assumption that no one is watching. There is another possibility that feels even quieter than being observed. That the observation is not centered on humans at all. It is easy to assume that if something were watching Earth, it would be watching us. Our cities, our technology, our conflicts, our achievements. This assumption reflects how humans think about importance. We place ourselves at the center, but an external observer might not. From a wider perspective, Earth is not just a civilization. It is a system, an atmosphere, an ocean, a network of life interacting across millions of years. Humans are part of that system, but not the whole of it. An observer interested in long-term patterns would focus on processes, not personalities. Climate cycles, ecosystem stability, energy flow, adaptation, and collapse. From that view, humanity may be interesting, but not unique. Just one phase in a much longer story. This idea removes drama from observation. It replaces attention with neutrality. The observer does not watch with concern or curiosity in a human sense. It watches because observation is its function, much like a sensor watching temperature or pressure. This may explain the lack of reaction to human milestones. Space travel, artificial intelligence, weapons, global communication. None of these would require intervention unless they altered the planet in irreversible ways. From a systems perspective, change is expected. Species rise. Species fall. Balance shifts. Recovery follows, or does not. If observation is focused on Earth as a whole, then silence becomes even more understandable. There would be no reason to single out one species for contact. No need to warn or guide. The system would simply be recorded. This idea feels unsettling in a different way. Not because it implies danger, but because it implies indifference. Humans prefer to be noticed, to matter individually, to believe attention follows intelligence. But intelligence does not guarantee importance. From a distant viewpoint, humanity's story may be one chapter among many. Interesting, complex, but not central. Worth observing, but not addressing. And if that is the case, then observation would continue regardless of human awareness. Not because of judgment, not because of curiosity, but because Earth itself is the subject. Life unfolding under changing conditions. A rare combination of chemistry and time. If something is watching, it may not be waiting for humanity to become ready. It may simply be waiting to see what Earth becomes, and whether balance holds, or changes, or disappears. All of it observed quietly, without comment, without urgency. without concern for who notices. If observation is happening, it may not be new. The idea feels unsettling because it is framed as recent, as if something suddenly turned its attention toward Earth. But from a longer perspective, observation does not need a beginning that humans can point to. It may have always been there. Civilizations tend to think in short arcs. A few generations feel like history. A few centuries feel ancient. But on cosmic timescales, these are moments. Brief flashes of activity on a planet that has existed for billions of years. If something observes planets as systems, it would not arrive when humans appear. It would arrive when the planet becomes interesting, when life begins to organize, when chemistry turns into biology, when stability allows complexity to grow. From that view, humanity is not the start of the story. It is a recent development within it. Observation may have been taking place through ages when no one was there to notice. Through ice ages. Through extinctions. Through long periods of quiet recovery. The planet changing slowly, patiently, under watchful awareness. This reframes the question entirely. Instead of asking why now, the better question becomes why would it ever stop? If observation began millions of years ago, it would continue through every phase that followed. It would adapt as conditions changed. It would record transitions without attachment. When humans emerged, they would not interrupt the process. They would simply become part of the data. This idea removes urgency from the present moment. It suggests that nothing has suddenly gone wrong. No threshold has been crossed that demands reaction. What feels intense to humans may feel ordinary from a wider view. Technological growth, environmental stress, social instability. These are dramatic within a single lifetime, but modest across planetary history. If something has been watching for that long, it would not be alarmed by acceleration. It would be patient. This perspective softens fear. It replaces the idea of imminent contact or judgment with continuity. Observation as a constant background condition, not an event. Something that does not arrive or leave. It simply remains. And if that is the case, then the feeling of being watched does not signal danger. It signals awareness catching up to reality. Not that observation has begun, but that humans have finally started to notice the possibility, which leads to a quiet realization. If something has always been watching, then nothing has changed. The sky is the same. The silence is the same. The distance is the same. Only perception has shifted, and perception, once changed, does not easily return to what it was before. It lingers, quietly, waiting for the final thought to settle, before the night grows still again. At some point, the need to answer the question begins to fade, not because the question is solved, but because it no longer feels urgent. The idea settles into the background, like the hum of a distant machine or the steady rhythm of breathing in a quiet room. Whether something is watching or not, the night continues. Earth turns slowly beneath the sky. Cities dim as people sleep. Lights go out one by one. Signals continue to travel outward, carrying fragments of human life into the dark without intention or awareness. Nothing changes. The moon remains where it has always been. The stars hold their places. The sky offers no reaction, no confirmation, no denial. And in that stillness, the mind begins to rest. There is a comfort in realizing that not every mystery demands resolution. Some questions exist to widen perspective, not to be closed. They remind us that life unfolds within something larger, quieter, and more patient than daily concerns. If something is watching, it does not hurry. If something is listening, it does not interrupt. And if nothing is there at all, then the universe remains exactly as it has always been, vast, silent, and indifferent to certainty. Either way, the outcome is the same. The night remains calm. Breathing slows. Thoughts soften. The weight of explanation loosens its grip. What once felt unsettling becomes distant, almost gentle. The idea of observation no longer feels threatening. It feels neutral, like a reminder that existence is not required to explain itself to anyone. Earth continues its quiet routines. Oceans move with invisible rhythms. Atmospheres shift. Life adapts, rests, and begins again. Above it all, the sky holds its silence. Not empty, not full, just open. And in that openness, the question drifts away, not answered, but no longer pressing. Because some thoughts are not meant to stay awake. They are meant to pass through the mind slowly, softly, and then fade. As awareness settles and the night deepens, there is nothing left to do but rest. The sky does not change. The silence does not break. And whatever may or may not be watching does not need to be known. For now, the night is quiet, and that is enough.